so very much. Do you remember that at all? Do you? So why then do you go and do that to us? I just want to ask that question real quick of why you go and pass that along. I know what it is I went through my kids' Christmas list or whatever, and we start handing that out to the grandparents. My grandkids, I come from a blended family, they have 7 grandmas. 7 grandmas, okay? It's tense. But we start going through that list, and I go, I don't want them to have any of these things. It was like all those things. I have stepped on more slime in the past week. I have stepped on more tea party sets. I have experienced my son riding a horse attached to springs for hours. He's lost 10 pounds. It's a great workout, but it has been a joy. No, we really are. I mean, as a grandparent, I know one day if I become a grandparent, it becomes the choice of the joy of my kids or my grandkids. I will choose them also. So I hope you had a great Christmas. And it is crazy. I mean, the question we have to ask today is, how do we rediscover joy on the other side of Christmas? Because we have went through the busyness of getting gifts. We have went through the busyness of having family gatherings, friend gatherings, the events we do here at the church, fireside, Christmas Eve gatherings. We have all these different things going on, and we rush through them, and all of a sudden Christmas happens, and it's over. We go past it, right? And so we have to ask the question, what do we do now? What do we do now? And to look at this, we're going to look at the life of Simeon and Anna. We're going to look at the life of Simeon and Anna. We have something to learn from Simeon's message that he passes on shortly after Jesus is born. And then we have something to learn from the life of Anna. And so we're going to look at that today. But I want to remind you, as we do each week, don't just take our word for it, my word for it. Dive into the scriptures for yourself. Use the study guides that we provide online or in the lobby. It's important that you take your faith seriously and dive deeper throughout the week so that Sundays isn't your only time of feeding on God's word and all those different things, but rather dive into it throughout the week. And so, once again, don't take my word for it. Dive into the scriptures for yourself. So, since we're on the other side of Christmas, we first got to talk about Christmas itself, right? Because Christmas is the invisible God becoming fully visible in one human being. It is the Word, the Logos, reality itself, everything good, going into flesh and blood and bone, right? It's becoming tangible. And it's the love of God shown to us by the fact that he was willing to become one of us, right? And so over 2,000 years ago, this reality took place in a small little town in Israel called Nazareth. And it happened to a teenage girl named Mary who was a virgin, and the angel Gabriel shows up to this young girl and says, hey, you are going to have a child. That child is going to be the Son of God. In tradition, we've called Mary the Mother of God, right? And she says, so be it, right? She knows the consequences that are going to happen between her and her fiance. She knows the consequences that are going to happen between her and her family and her friends as she tries to explain this. But she says to the angel, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled, right? And so Mary becomes pregnant, and then becomes the easy job for Mary of convincing her husband, I didn't do anything wrong, right? Going up to Joseph and saying, hey, I got great news. I'm pregnant, right? And Joseph all of a sudden has a million thoughts running through his head. And the one thought I guarantee that didn't run through his head is what she says next of, hey, don't worry. It's the Son of God, right? In which Mary or Joseph would have been like, man, that blindsided me. I did not see, out of all the things you were going to say, I did not see that coming. And so did Joseph believe her? I mean, that easy to believe statement? No, he didn't believe her at all. And so what we see in the Christmas story is that shortly after that, Joseph has a dream, and the angel appears to Joseph and says, hey, you are to take Mary as your wife, and you are to name this child Jesus, which means God saves. And it's important to know that the naming rights belong to the Father. So that was like God saying, hey, you are to raise this child as your own. Now, after this happens, Mary's pregnant, Joseph's on board. They find out that the Roman Empire is going to do a census. And so everyone's going to have to go to their hometown. And so Mary and Joseph have to take the easy journey, 90 miles from Mary's hometown of Nazareth to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem. And so they arrive at Bethlehem, and Mary starts having contractions, right? It's time for Jesus to arrive. Everyone's excited. Joseph forgets to book an Airbnb, so they're kind of panicking a little bit of where are we going to have this child. And Joseph, I judge hard. Joseph, I will say this, I will confess this. I judge Joseph's family so badly. Because if you have your wife's, if your fiance is pregnant, she's about to have a baby, you would hope that your family's like, go ahead, use our room. Like you would hope that would be the case, but we don't see that. Rather, we see everyone say, hey, we don't have room, we don't have room, we don't have room. And so they go to a cave, which at this time is where animals were kept, under the house in a cave that would be known as a stable. And Jesus, the Son of God, is born alongside animals. What a story. And placed in a manger. And it says that shepherds and kings came to visit him, which is the whole gospel in itself, that Jesus showed up for what at that time would have been considered the lowest and the highest. He showed up for all people. And that is the Christmas story. But what we got to look at today, and what I want to focus on today, is something that took place shortly after the nativity scene. This would have happened anywhere from 8 to 40 days after Jesus was born. And here's where the story is. This is in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. It says, led by the Spirit, Simeon went into the temple area. Meanwhile, Jesus' parents brought the child to the temple so that they could do what was customary under the law. Now, we'll get to Simeon, but I want to focus on that second part, which is Mary and Joseph. They're doing what is customary to the law. Now, the first thing that is the circumcision of Jesus. This would have happened 8 days after Jesus' birth, and this would have been the job of Joseph to present Jesus. This is called the presentation of Jesus, to be circumcised. And while he was circumcised, that's also when they named the child. And so this is Joseph's opportunity to claim him as his own and to say, this is a child of God, this is my child as well, and this child will be named Jesus. So that's the first customary law that they did under the law. The second element is Mary's offering in the temple. Now, Mary goes forward with what is called the ritual of purification, which would have happened for a boy 33 days after birth. Now, what's interesting and what's I think funny is that girls, you actually had to wait longer, because we all know girls are way messier than boys, right? Like, that's just the way it is. That was supposed to be a joke. It didn't land. Anyways, maybe it's true. I don't know by your response. But Mary goes into the temple, and she offers 2 birds. It could be 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. And this is all Mary and Joseph could afford at this time. And they were a humble family just seeking to live out their faith. And I think that's the sign for us to take is that Jesus came for the least and the lost, and the last. That Jesus came up out of poverty to provide hope to the world. And I think with our modern minds, as we look at these customs and these traditions, it's hard for us to really grasp them. But what we need to know, and I think the important point here is that Mary and Joseph took their faith seriously. That they took their faith very serious, that they were humble people pursuing God and wanted to give thanks and gratitude for all that he had done for them, especially through the life of Jesus. And so that's Mary and Joseph, what they're doing under the customary law. The beginning of that scripture said, led by the Spirit, Simeon went into the temple. Now, Simeon is what we believe is an older man at this time, and tradition tells us that for decades before this, Simeon had been told that he would witness the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the Christ, which means the anointed one. And so Simeon, day after day, went into the temple because he knew who had to go to the temple? Every Jewish newborn baby. And so if you're going to see the Messiah, if you're going to see the Christ, where would you go? To the temple. Because every Jewish baby has to go to the temple to do these things. And so Simeon goes to the temple, and he immediately sees Jesus, and he gets excited. He's joyous because the thing he has been waiting on for so long finally walked through the temple doors. And Simeon begins to sing, because when we're all excited, we all sing, right? I don't, but Simeon does. So when he gets excited, he begins to sing, and here's what he sings. It's called the Nunc Dimittis, which simply means, now you dismiss. And here's what Simeon says, the front part of the song. Now, Master, let your servant go in peace according to your word, because my eyes have seen your salvation. You prepared this salvation in the presence of all peoples. It's a light for revelation to the Gentiles and glory for your people, Israel. Now, I want you to try to imagine Mary and Joseph walk in with Jesus. I want you to try to imagine the overwhelming feeling Mary and Joseph must be feeling when they walk in and this man begins singing this praise, singing this song, singing this joyous song about their son. They began experiencing this overwhelming feeling. Jesus, who we're later told is the light of the world, who is the long-awaited Messiah, Jesus would not only be the hope and the light and the comfort of Israel, but would also be the hope and the light and the comfort to everyone, all throughout the world, even you and I. Imagine the overwhelming feeling they must have felt, because this is the very first Christmas. This is the very first Christmas. And we all know the overwhelming feeling we get. We've kind of just getting out of it. Some of you still are in it, but we're just getting out of that overwhelming feeling of the busyness and the gifts and all these different things that happen along Christmas. Well, this is the first one. So whatever you're feeling, imagine how much more Joseph and Mary are experiencing this overwhelming delight in the news of Jesus. But the thing with Simeon is, Simeon did not want to miss Christmas. I mean, he showed up day after day after day because he didn't want to miss Christmas. And I know so many of us, we get so busy that sometimes we do miss it. That it happens and then it goes. But Simeon wanted to make sure that never happened to him. Now, Simeon's often depicted as an older man. He's depicted, I got a picture here, he's depicted with a white beard, frail, waiting and longing for the Messiah to come. But I picture Simeon a little bit different than that. Because you got to remember, Simeon's told he's going to see the Messiah. Simeon's going to see the Christ. And if you're told that you're going to see the Messiah or see the Christ, I'd imagine you'd have a little more bounce in your step, right? You'd have a little more excitement, energy, enthusiasm that every day brings. And so when I see Simeon, I see him joyous and excited and all these different things. And Simeon would have been a person that would have saw joy in the mundane things of life. Because he knew that through the mundane things, you got to realize, babies going to be purified, or women going to be purified, and the rituals that all these Jewish people had to go through, this was mundane stuff that happened every single day at the Jewish temple. And so Simeon had to do the mundane things and found joy in the mundane things so that he could witness what? The miraculous. And so after doing the mundane work of finding joy in that, eventually Simeon got to experience the joy of seeing the Christ, which is why the Messiah, which is why he sings out in joy. And so Simeon, this pious and devout man, is led by the Spirit, and he sees the Messiah, and he begins singing this song. And as he's singing this song, he grabs Jesus and gives Mary a heart attack, right? As anyone would if they're just holding their child. What mothers? I go mothers more here. Like, I remember when Jess, like, seeing her with Creed, just someone would come up and go, "Oh, he's so cute," and then just grab, and like Jess has this panic look. For me, I'm like, "Do you want him for a little bit?" Like, you want to? I'll be back in an hour, But anyways, Mary, Simeon's singing this song. He takes Jesus into his arms, and he begins to bless this young family, and blesses them in a way that's not very ordinary. Here's what he continues to sing. This boy is assigned to be the cause of the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that generates opposition so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed. And then he looks at the parents, and he says, "And a sword will pierce your innermost being too." A sword will pierce your innermost being too. Now, if I'm Mary and Joseph, I would be like, "Hey, he's cute would have been fine, Simeon." Like, you know what I mean? Like, a simple "he's cute." I don't know if Jesus was cute, hopefully. But anyways, a simple "he's cute" would have been fine, right? But he looks, I picture him looking at Mary and go, "Mary, because of this child, because of what they're going to have to go through, your innermost being will be pierced as well." Fred Craddock, an incredible preacher and thinker, wrote this: "The inescapable fact is that anyone who turns on light creates shadows. Anyone who turns on light creates and reveals shadows, darkness." The consolation of our hopes and our fears, the comfort of our sorrows and pain, the comfort of our frustration and failure, the comfort of ourselves, often comes through the piercing of our own souls and our own life. Simeon knew this about Jesus. Simeon knew this about Mary. Simeon knew this about Joseph. And I want to simply ask you, have you experienced, you don't have to raise your hand, have you experienced a kind of piercing in your own life? I know in my life there's been many different piercings. Piercings that I've brought upon myself, piercings that have been done to me, moments where I just felt like I fell on the sword, and moments where I went into piercing so that someone else maybe didn't have to experience the piercing. And this is what Simon wants us to capture. Because you got to remember, the Christmas has been a joyous part for Mary and Joseph up until this point, up until this message. I mean, they've received the Son of God. What could go wrong, right? They have the Messiah. They have the Christ that everyone's been waiting on. Smooth sailing, right? But what Simeon's telling Mary, and what Mary cannot yet see soon after Christmas, is that there will be piercing. That shortly after that, King Herod is going to try to have the Messiah that he heard was born in Bethlehem killed. And so King Herod has every baby boy under 2 years old in Bethlehem killed. Talk about piercing. Having to journey to a new land, to a new area, to become, become a refugee at a new land, in a new territory. Have to find a home and a job and all those things. And then the piercing that Mary has to experience. We so often overlook this and don't think about the pain that this would have caused. But Jesus starts his ministry off, and it does not go well in his hometown. They remove him out of his hometown, which was whose hometown? Mary's. The people that she had spent all of her life with removed her son out of their hometown. The people that had helped raise Jesus saw him as a madman. It was crazy. And didn't believe his message. Can you imagine the piercing that would have been? And then the religious leaders that Mary looked up to her whole life began to ridicule and persecute her son as he goes into his ministry. And then last, but certainly not least, the one we always know and the piercing we always think about when it comes to Jesus is the moment at the cross. Who's there at kneeling at the cross? Is the mother of Jesus. Right? Talk about a piercing. And so they're right after Christmas, and Simeon goes, Mary, you're going to experience piercing. You're going to experience pain. You're going to experience suffering because of raising this child. But here's the thing that I want us all to know, is that piercing and pain never get the last word. Right behind piercing and pain, there is always joy. When we look at the life of Mary, we see her experiencing pain and piercing and sorrow and all these things all throughout her life. And as she watches her son die on the cross, I can't imagine there being a more piercing moment. She leaves, but then what happens 3 days later? Jesus resurrects. And he begins teaching for the next 40 days, providing ministry and telling them what they're going to be doing and revealing himself to the people he loved and cared about and that followed him. And after that, they said he went to the vicinity of Bethany, and it says in Ephesians that he raised higher than the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. And after he was taken up, after he ascended to the heavens, it says that they all went to the upper room in Jerusalem and began to pray. And here's who was there. Those present were Peter, John, James, and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas, son of James. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. Do you think seeing her son resurrected healed all the piercings? I think so. Do you think seeing her son resurrected and ascending into heaven brought joy to Mary's life? I think so. I think the important thing to know is that Mary went through piercings, but piercings and pain and sorrow did not get the last word. Joy got the last word, and that's the message Simeon wants us to receive too. That in 2020, which is crazy to say, in 2020, you'll experience great things. You will experience celebrations, joy, all these different things, but guess what you're also going to experience? You're going to experience piercing, pain, sorrow throughout this year. I've yet to go through a year that was perfect. I'm still trying. But every year there's seasons of pain and sorrow and piercing that you just go through in life. But what we need to remember is that through the piercing, through the pain, through the sorrow, joy always gets the last word. And joy will heal the piercings. Okay? And so that's the message we want to receive from Simeon. Now, I really want us to look at Anna. Okay? Anna was a prophet. She was phenomenal. If Simeon sings, okay, so if Simeon sings, then Anna shouts, okay? Because Anna is not like a street preacher, okay? Like, I remember we went to the beach one time. There's this guy, like, with a megaphone just working the beach every night and just sending us all to hell. But I don't mean Anna was, like, shouting in that way, right? But from a place of passion and excitement and enthusiasm. Like, when Anna saw the Messiah, she goes, have you heard? Have you heard yet? Have you seen? The Messiah has arrived. His name's Jesus. He's here. Full of excitement and enthusiasm. I love this image that we have of Anna. And look at Simeon. Look at the joy. You can just see, like, they've been waiting for so long for something, and they finally are holding that child. God, the energy. It reminds me of that, or just two grandparents holding a child for the first. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of that same image, but it's just a cool moment and a cool experience for both of them. And Anna's story is important because in the scriptures it says that Anna was married for 7 years, and then it depends on what translation you read. One translation says that she was a widow for 84 years. Another translation says that she was 84 years old when Jesus arrived. Either way, she's a young woman, right? And she has spent all of her life worshiping God after being a widow. When she became a widow, she spent the rest of her life worshiping God. She had been waiting and waiting the entire time. She had devoted her entire life to waiting. Now, it's important to know at this time that there was a special in the early church, there was believed to be an order to that church that was specific to widows. Okay, that was something that was birthed out of the church, actually, shortly after this. And widows had a specific job, and even the Jewish faith took very important care of their widows. But the widow's role in the Jewish faith and in the Christian faith was to worship, pray, and fast for themselves and for others. Like, their job was to worship, pray, and fast for themselves and for others, and the community's job was to help provide and take care of them. Mainly, the family's job was to help provide and take care of them while they lived this life of worship. And even moments, some women did not want to be widows, and so there was a thing called the kinsman redeemer, where a family member would take the widow as his spouse, right? Not her family member, but the husband's family would take her in as the spouse, because for a lot of people, widowhood was not preferred. But you know, Anna chose to be a widow and to spend the rest of her life worshiping God in prayer and in fasting. She had to know these words from Isaiah. It said, "Don't fear because you won't be ashamed. Don't be dismayed because you won't be disgraced. The one redeeming you is the Holy One of Israel, the one called the God of all the earth." Anna represents what is best about Israel. Worshiping God with her entire life, devoted to giving thanks and praise to God. Waiting faithfully for the Messiah. Anna becomes the first evangelist that we see in the scriptures for Jesus. Going and sharing and telling everyone that she's around. You see, Simeon and Anna both didn't just spend their time wasted in the temple waiting for God. They spent time actively seeking, actively listening, and actively living a life knowing that the coming of the Messiah would change their own. They believed that once this Messiah arrived, it would change their life forever. It would change the world. It would change Israel. It would change the world. It would change everyone's life when this Messiah came. And guess what? when the Messiah arrived, it changed Simeon's life, it changed Anna's life, and it changed all of ours. Which means Christmas can, in fact, change us. And Christmas does, in fact, change us. A couple months ago, so once a month we gather as a staff and we kind of share life-changing stories that happen, whether through baptism or serving or different ways. And it's one of my favorite, it is my favorite meeting throughout the month, where we just get to hear people led to an act of faith in Jesus Christ. And a couple months ago, I can't remember who it was, shared Kyle's story. Kyle's right here. And what was funny is after she started sharing, I think it was Kaylin, after Kaylin started sharing the story, then all of a sudden 3 or 4 other people started raising their hands. And they go, hey, Kyle shared his story with me as well. And Kyle shared his story with me and me and me. And what all of them said was the same. This is someone who has encountered God. This is someone who has experienced Christmas. This is someone who has experienced that God became flesh, died, and resurrected for us. Because Kyle's story is like so many of our stories, where we were seeking peace, joy, love, hope, all those things in anything we could find, in things that culture offered us, and in all these other things. We tried to find it and find it and find it, and kept coming up empty and empty and empty. But Kyle said he went to the DAV and he was done. He was ready to just disconnect from community, disconnect from people. He was done trying to find where hope and love and all those things are. And when he was there at the DAV, Charles Hood said, hey, why don't you come to CR and come check out Celebrate Recovery? And Kyle's, I'll give it a shot. I'll give something one last try. And Kyle came to CR, experienced the community, but ultimately experienced God and experienced Christ in a way that changed his life. In a way that, like we see with Saul and Paul, in days took him from being a person stranded looking for anything to finding it and sharing that light with others. And I had the opportunity to baptize Kyle a couple weeks ago. I think we got a picture. We don't have a picture up. Never mind. You want to redo it, Kyle? No. But just witnessing that moment of baptism, of just being able to, for him, it was a beautiful moment to be able to release all that seeking and pursuing and finding it and trying to find it in other things, in a moment to receive the light and to experience the light. And now Kyle does nothing but share the light with others. Through serving, through social media, through all those different things, he can't help but share it with others. And so I want to tell you that, yeah, on the other side of Christmas, there's going to be piercing, but no, piercing does not get the last word, that joy does. And another way for us to embrace joy on the other side of Christmas is to share the light that Christ has shared with us. And if you're waiting right now, and if you haven't experienced that light yet, I want to just ask you one thing. Please keep searching. Please keep seeking, because I can guarantee you, I can promise you, that God will walk through those doors if you just open them, as he walked through those temple doors with Mary and Joseph for Simeon and Simon. So may you embrace the joy that comes from Christmas, and may we share Christmas, the light of Christ, with others all throughout the year of 2020. Would you pray with me, please? God, I just want to ask right now that you maybe guide and help and reveal the piercing that is in our lives. I can't imagine any of us that have no piercing whatsoever. So I just ask that in this moment you heal that piercing, you begin to work in that piercing to allow your love and your hope and your joy and your peace to overcome it. God, for others of us in this room, maybe who haven't experienced your light, God, I ask for you to break in and to break through, and for all of us to have the courage to open the doors and to allow that light to shine in. And lastly, God, I ask that for those of us that have received the light and experienced the light, give us the courage and the boldness and the strength to share that light with others. Keep us from being selfish and holding on to it. And give us the ability to share it with love and hope. God, you are good, you are faithful, you are love, you are all things. And I love you so very much. It's in your beautiful name we pray. Amen. Amen. Just so you know, we're going to be starting a new message series next week called Life is Too Short. Things like life is too short to be a Chiefs fan. Life is too short to be... Is that not it? No. Oh, sorry. Life is too short to live a life of shame. Same as a Chiefs fan. But life is too short to work all the time. Life is too short to play it safe. And we just want to encourage you to come and participate and allow God to work through you in that message series. But would all of you stand, please? St. Paul's, may you be a people that knows when you leave this place, you are not going alone. The creator of the universe is for you. The Christ, the anointed one, is within you, with you, and the Holy Spirit of love is within you. So go in God's hope, God's love, God's joy, and God's peace. Have a great week. See ya.